And we are rolling on October 29th, where we are about to debate the question whether the U.S. should unilaterally reduce carbon emissions. You didn't put the whole thing up, huh?
No.
Why not?
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead and put it up while I'm killing time over here. On the affirmative will be Joseph Perez, what's your lunch, huh? What is it, an ice cream bar?
No.
It's not healthy for you. It's not healthy.
You have clip with arsenic in them?
Even
Yeah. Do you get enough to think that? You poison yourself.
Well,
in what?
sunflower soup could be selling them on campus.
Maybe a little bit like arsenic in them, I guess. So you can eat like enough because it's no, like all clip bars, yeah.
Okay.
I still need like 1,000 or something, but like, yeah, apparently you do it, you can.
This is organic.
Thank you so much, Justin. As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, the U.S. should unilaterally reduce carbon emissions, regardless of whether China and India and developing countries cooperate. On the negative will be Justin. On the affirmative for the government will be Joseph Perez. And you'll call this House to order. And we will hear from the leader of the government for a speech not to exceed 7 minutes in length. Hear, hear. Boy, you're tall. Thank you for wearing a suit and respecting the activity.
No worries.
Suit and tie, excellent. And you don't blend with the backdrop either. Okay. Do I have your briefs? I do. Thank you. Okay. And your time has started.
Okay. So the topic we'll be resolving today is whether the U.S. should unilaterally reduce carbon emissions regardless of whether China, India, and other developing countries cooperate. The proposition will be presented as a policy debate case taken from the affirmative stance, and the definitions I'll be defining are unilaterally reduced carbon emissions. In this brief, this is central to the resolution of the problem. Unilaterally reducing carbon emissions will be measured by the cost of reducing emissions outweighing the benefits to the environment. I will prove this concept additionally. The phrase unilaterally reducing carbon emissions gives us the presumption that the United States lowering carbon emissions gives no benefit. Therefore, if I am able to prove that as the affirmative that the United States reduction of carbon emissions is in fact beneficial to the world's environment, then I win the debate. What is the problem? Many argue that by the U.S. unilaterally reducing carbon emissions, there will be little to no benefit. But the real problem is not one of the U.S. unilaterally reducing carbon emissions, but more of a productivity issue, in that increased carbon emissions increase global warming, which in turn reduces productivity and is detrimental to the economy. According to the study by the scientists and economists of the Climate Hot Map organization in 2014, global warming disrupted daily life, which in turn translated to lost work and school days, and it harms trade, transportation, agriculture, fisheries, energy production, and tourism by more than 10%. If we do not make an effort now to set the example in reducing our carbon footprint, Not only will the global warming continue to occur, but the lifespan of the Earth will inevitably diminish. Climate change is not a problem for another or the next generation anymore. It's a problem for us to solve now. How big is the problem? The problem is colossal and it continues to grow. It is economically tolling on the world, extremely detrimental to health conditions, and even more detrimental to the environment that fights back for climate change. According to a study by the White House in 2012, extreme weather conditions cost the United States over $100 billion. This is an extremely high toll on the economy. As for the health conditions, according to a study by Harvard University in 2014, there are over 4,000 premature deaths annually attributed to extreme changes in weather, 2,000 non-fatal heart attacks, and almost 100,000 asthma attacks in children due to respiratory issues caused by pollution.
5 left.
Why do we have the problem? The problem of an increase in carbon emissions into the atmosphere is a direct result of prehistoric technology being used for manufacturing and exists because as countries try to grow and develop and expand economically, they rely on these methods of production that are inefficient. What is the solution? The solution to the problem is to set the example of increased productivity with less emissions and show economic benefits of going green. The increase in productivity can be measured by the amount of goods produced with eco-friendly manufacturing and the cost efficiency of using eco-friendly materials, which in turn assist to generate more profits for business. Secondly, we need to reduce carbon intensity of electric generation. According to the World Research Institute, from a study conducted in 2013, producing cleaner power is more economically effective than ever before. The prices of solar panels decreased by 80% since 2008. Natural gas plants cost less than new coal generation, and renewable energy is cheaper than either fuel in a growing number of markets. Additionally, a large portion of emissions comes from vehicles. To solve this part of the problem, we must begin to build cleaner passenger vehicles. In a study by The Economist in 2013, they found that 670 billion to 2.3 trillion are predicted to be saved from reduced fuel costs that will occur between 2020 and 2050 if vehicle emissions drop 80% below the level of 2008. We also must reduce consumption of HFCs. Emissions from HFCs, commonly used as refrigerants, are on the rise in the United States. The global warming impact of certain HFCs can be thousands of times greater than carbon dioxide, scaling back to their yields, climate, and efficiency benefits.
3.
In the 2014 study by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, Coca-Cola currently uses 1 million HFC coolers, which will prevent the drop of emissions by about 5.25 million metric tons of carbon emissions in the next 10 years. In that same study, they found that Heineken has made a transition to HFC-free coolers and has had a 15% savings in the past year with an increase in their cooling productivity. Now, will the solution work? First off, as the United States unilaterally lowering emissions is to set an example for the rest of the world. This aspect of the solution will definitely work, as Obama has launched a policy vowing to lower emissions by 2030, and shortly after, China followed with their own policy that will decrease emissions by 20% in 2030. As for reducing the intensity of electric generation, this is economically more beneficial to the population. Solar energy has become much more cost efficient over the past 5 years and will continue to decrease as technology increases. The lower cost for energy is not just monetary, but it is also reflected in the carbon footprint in the United States leaves behind. Now, for reducing electricity consumption in homes and businesses, this reduction is economically beneficial as well. Clean energy costs on average 50 to 67 less than the high emission energy generation sources. Now, reducing the consumption of HFC refrigeration systems they are an ancient technology which are inefficient. We can see this through the example mentioned earlier of Heineken lowering their refrigeration costs by transitioning to an HFC-free system. These systems have proven to function much more efficiently. Now, what are the advantages of my proposal? In the economic sphere, the USC analysis found that by a 25 by 2025 national renewable electricity standard will stimulate $263.4 billion in new capital investment for renewable energy technologies, $13.5 billion in new landowner income biomass production and/or wind land lease payments, and $11.5 billion in new property tax revenue.
1.
Now, for the preservation, at the current rate we are heading in, the Earth will not be able to sustain itself by 2050. By the United States lowering their emissions, the rest of the world will follow just how they have with many other trends. Preserving the Earth for future generations to enjoy is the biggest advantage of this proposal brings. Now, on balance, what outweighs? Without a reasonable doubt, the advantages of the United States unilaterally reducing carbon emissions significantly outweighs the disadvantages. The prevention of future damage to the earth, accompanied by an increase in the productivity of goods by transitioning from heavy carbon emitting manufacturing process to eco-friendly manufacturing, we can create a more sustainable form of energy with a stable price that causes much less harm to the environment. As long as the results are transparent, the rest of the world will follow the example of the United States.
I now stand open.
I now stand open for points of clarification and cross-examination.
Thank you so much. Chair will now hear a cross-examination not to exceed 3 minutes in length. Please come to the podium, both speakers. Try not to wear white when you debate. You blend with the background. Could you step to that way a little bit, please? Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Justin.
Hi, Justin.
So central to your debate, you mentioned that economic efficiency is one of the main goals and one of the main problems that we need to solve. So since economic efficiency works by specializing and sharing knowledge, why should the U.S. unilaterally reduce emissions instead of operating with other countries?
Because by unilaterally doing it, we're one of the biggest contributors to the to the crisis. So by us setting the example for the rest of the world, they'll follow just how China has. China's the #1. They're right above us, but as soon as we propose...
Tell the audience, not him.
As soon
They're
as
trying to
Obama
persuade them.
proposes bill to lower environmental costs, China lowered it. China did the same thing a few months later.
2.
So if the goal is to have other countries follow, does that not inherently mean that they're cooperating with our efforts?
Yes, they are cooperating, but to make a system where they cooperate, you would have to inflict taxes and tariffs, which inevitably would restrict trade and then lower economic benefits.
Second, you mentioned that HFC coolers and emissions from vehicles are our main contribution that we need to fix. However, many of the appliances that are in our homes and vehicles are produced in other countries, and by us reducing our consumption of these things, would that not affect our economy just as drastically?
Could you repeat that again?
Since most of the HFC coolers, fridges, and vehicles are produced in other countries, by reducing our consumption of these things, are we not negatively impacting our economy?
Well, in terms of the vehicles, six manufacturers that import cars that export cars to the United States have all to have electric cars, and seven of them already have over 10 cars in production that are fully electric. So, continuing to trade with those vehicles or to purchase those vehicles will not hinder any environmental costs.
30.
You mentioned also that the U.S. should unilaterally reduce its emissions so that the rest of the world will follow. How do you account for the fact that China is significantly the largest emitter?
Well, I can't account for how significantly high they are, but I can
30.
account for them implementing a policy which will lower their emissions by 2030 by over 20%, which they launched as soon, like a few months after the United States launched theirs.
You make the argument that switching the focus towards renewable energy...
That's time. Okay, Chair will now recognize the Leader of the Opposition for a speech not to exceed 7 minutes in length.
Okay.
Rock and roll.
The proposition will be proposed as a policy debate case taken from the negative stance, and the criteria for assessing truth will be a preponderance of evidence and quality of evidence in favor of the proposition. Definitions. Free riding. Free riding is an economic scenario in which those who benefit from resources, goods, or services do not pay the associated costs and therefore enjoys the benefit freely. This is central to my resolution because given that the environment is a global public good, which I'll define later, if the United States were to solely reduce carbon emissions, other countries will have a large incentive to enjoy the benefits of U.S. abatement, and while they continue to emit, the U.S. will be harmed economically. If I prove that the United States will face the problem of free riding if it decides to unilaterally reduce carbon emissions, then it will prove that the U.S. should not unilaterally abate carbon emissions, and I win the debate. spatial fix. Spatial fix is a concept that refers to the displacement of associated costs, where the cause of externalities is not paying the associated costs, and they are displaced for someone else to pay. Tragedy of commons, a term originally used by Garrett Hardin to denote a situation where individuals acting independently and rationally according to each individual's self-interest behave contrary to the best interest of the whole group. And to define global public good, a global public good differs from national or local public good because there is not a market or governmental mechanism to regulate it. What is the problem? Climate change is a global ecological issue where the Earth's average temperature is increasing due to high rates of carbon emissions. Len Fisher, Nobel Prize-winning scientist, said in 2015, average global temperatures, for example, have risen approximately 0.13 Celsius degrees per decade since 1950, and human drivers of the climate change include the burning of fossil fuels and pollution from power plants.
5.
Since the United States is significantly the largest emitter of carbon dioxide per capita GDP, many argue that the problem is the U.S. should unilaterally reduce its carbon emissions. However, China is actually the largest emitter, and therefore they should be the ones to cooperate and also reduce their emissions. The United States being the biggest emitter is actually not the truth. The real problem here is free riding, which currently frustrates international efforts to reduce carbon emissions. Within the context of global climate, the resource is global climate is a global public good, so there's no authority to regulate it. And so far, it has proven difficult to overcome the obstacles reaching international agreements because many countries see global actions against climate change as endangering their vital economic interests. This is said by Russian sociologist Sebastian Posenik. Therefore, there's an issue when people say that the United States should unilaterally reduce carbon emissions regardless of what other countries do, given that the U.S. is justified in looking for its self-interest and other countries have a large incentive to free ride.
4.
How big is the problem? Some people believe that the problem is that the United States has unwillingness to unilaterally reduce its carbon emissions, but this is not the issue because China is the biggest emitter. The large incentive to free ride presents significant cost of abatement, and there is a spatial fix that displaces these costs. China is the world's leading energy-related CO2 emitter, says the Energy Information Association. Free riding is an inevitable issue because there is no international body to regulate it. Individual actors, as Sebastian Posenik says again, individual actors in such models are driven by one-dimensional motivation for profit, and they will act in their self-interest. Due to a lack of higher regulatory entity and it being a public good, countries will exploit this resource until it is depleted. Further, industrialized countries use this concept of spatial fix to solve their problems, and when countries begin to reach their limits of capital, they
3.
move their production and they move their factories and workers somewhere else so that the costs are displaced somewhere else. Furthermore, because the costs are not immediate, they're also displaced into the future for future generations to bear, and those are extremely hard to quantify. Why do we have this problem? Because there's a tragedy of the commons. Famous economist Garrett Hardin says, "Ruin is the destination toward which all men rush, each pursuing his own best interest to society." And because the earth isn't going to collapse tomorrow, people believe that we shouldn't deal with this problem now. And that's why the US, and that's why China and stuff are not willing to abate their emissions. Second, we have not reached this because of the spatial fix, as I described earlier. The current situation displaces these costs into the future, or moving factories to other places of production. So, it still warrants the question, how is free riding the symptom of all this? Inherent in this capitalist system is that the United States is competing with other countries, and in investing in renewable
2.
they will face a disadvantage, and other countries will have an incentive to free ride. So what is the solution? The solution is something that William Nordhaus, a professor of economics at Yale, calls a climate club, which follows a threefold step. First is to have powerful countries voluntarily reach an exclusionary trade agreement that makes people want to reduce carbon emissions with an economic incentive. So once they join this group membership, secondly, they will impose a carbon tax to all members where there's a proportional tax bracket depending on how much a country emits. And inherent in this is that it will disproportionately affect the biggest emitters, which forces them to internalize their costs. Lastly, the trade benefits of lower tariff rates. If you're not a member of this club, then you will face high tariff rates, which gives you an economic incentive to join the club. Will this solution work? The Climate Club is the best option we have because there's no regulatory entity, and now a globalized, inclusive economic mechanism will be that solution. If implementing this carbon tax proportionally will force the biggest emitters to internalize their costs. And finally, by excluding other countries, it will force them to join because of high tariff rates. The advantages to my proposal are that it will finally solve the problem of free riding, and it will also reduce carbon emissions in total. The most obvious disadvantage is that it is extremely difficult to get the United States and China to agree with each other. However, if they and other major countries decide to join this agreement, other countries will follow because they'll face economic disadvantages. Without a doubt, the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, and by ensuring that cooperation through this climate club, we can solve the problem of free riding, which is the true issue to global ecological degradation.
I now stand open.
I now stand open to cross-examination.
Thank you. Okay, could you bunch up a little, please? Good, right there. Good. Good. You're tall. Wow. Okay, good.
Okay, so
Rock
you
and
stated
roll.
that the real problem is free riding because it puts an economic toll on the countries implementing policy. But how would these countries benefit or have an economic advantage, as you stated, if the cleaner burning fuels are more efficient, therefore less costly, therefore increasing their profits and advancing their economy?
Inherent to this is before those technologies can be developed, you have to invest now. And currently, if the rest of the world is investing in technologies that are becoming more efficient, that aren't renewable, those advantages will be met, will come up now, while the benefits of these renewable energies will surface later down the road. So
True.
you're at a disadvantage now.
But most of these technologies that you're talking about need to be developed or already developed. We have fuel-efficient cars, we have low-emission cars, we also have the HFC refrigerating system that I spoke about earlier. All these are forms of technology that lower emissions.
So the U.S. is lowering emissions currently. However, China and India, who are the two two of the most powerful and up-and-coming industrialized countries, are emitting and increasing their emissions every year. So we should have them cooperate if we're going to solve this issue.
China is also lowering their emissions currently with their policy that they have. But,
Make it a question.
okay, so you also mentioned that capitalism is driven by increasing profits and decreasing costs. Wouldn't the transition to much cleaner burning fuels that are more efficient and less costly do both decrease costs and increase profits?
They would, however, they do not
One.
uniformly decrease those costs. Other people have to incur those costs. So while the United States, because of this global economy, while the United States is investing in technologies that will improve their economy in the long run, a lot of other countries will be affected now, and that makes other people not want to cooperate.
So, like I said earlier, the HFC coolers that Heineken has implemented have saved them 15%, which inevitably turn into revenue for their profits. So how exactly do they not decrease costs and increase profits?
Okay, last question. Answer that.
Because the increase in profits for that company inevitably mean that there are associated costs that will raise for other people, such as related industries that help produce those products.
Thank you very much. Time for the government rebuttal. Four-step refutation, I hope. Begin.
So am I asking him questions?
No, you're refuting. He said, I disagree because therefore. You
Okay.
refute what he just said. It's a rebuttal.
All right. So he said,
You do it at the podium.
okay. So he said that the environment is a global public good with no regulatory agency, but later in his argument he said that the current regulatory agencies are inefficient. So I disagree with this because I feel it's a contradiction in your argument. Does he respond?
No.
No?
You-
Okay.
Okay, I disagree now because
Oh.
because
I feel that
it's a contradiction. Explain the contradiction and give it impact. There's 4 steps to refutation.
Okay, so the contradiction is in that he stated that the current regulatory agencies are insufficient, but then he proposed a climate club, which would be the only regulatory agency. So in itself, that's a contradiction. An inherent effect of this would be that the climate club would restrict trades with the taxes they impose to non-members. So you said only non-members, only strong members of developed countries can join the club. So therefore, leaving lower developing countries to not be able to trade or be forced to pay high taxes. I disagree with this because I feel that that's going to be more economically tolling on the world than the environment, that implementing regulatory agencies to the environment.
Therefore what?
Therefore, I don't think that the climate club would be a good resolution or solution to this problem. Also, you said
He said,
he said we shouldn't deal with the problem now.
1 minute.
And I disagree with this because why would we have to wait until the problem is too big to fix instead of fixing it now and nipping it in the bud? Therefore, the United States unilaterally reducing carbon emissions would assist the environment and the economy and the longevity of the world.
Okay. Thank you. Now we'll hear the negative refutation.
Am I to refute?
You're to refute what he said, yes. Gosh, yes. 4 steps of refutation. And again, folks, it would really help if you watched the debates, the videotapes on YouTube, and you saw how the 4 steps were done. But basically, he said, I disagree because therefore. So he said, we have a problem. I disagree because therefore. Okay? Begin.
He said that the United States should unilaterally reduce its carbon emissions regardless of what other countries do. However, I disagree because the economy is globalized now and there are many players that are involved, and therefore the United States, even if they wanted to be unilaterally reducing their emissions, is not actually viable. Therefore, I disagree and think that the United States should cooperate with other countries in order to reduce carbon emissions. Secondly, he said that the problem that we face is that reduced productivity and global warming. However, it is the increased productivity that actually contributes to global warming, and therefore I find that to be a misconception or a fallacy in his argument. Also, although China is, he said that by the United States leading, the other countries will follow. However, China being the largest emitter by a large margin, and also being the largest consumer of coal and a host of other energies, as well as being the largest producer to U.S. consumption, I disagree and think that China would inevitably have to play a part in this. Therefore, I think that other countries should cooperate as well.
Okay, one more and then we'll call it a day. He said
that this problem with global warming and ecological degradation leads to bad health and a problem for the environment. However, he also mentioned the economic costs. So the argument takes on 2 different approaches, and it distracted from what the central issue was.
Therefore,
I disagree and think that the United States should cooperate with other countries in reducing carbon emissions.
okay, thank you very much. Okay, make your vote quickly, folks. We're almost out of time. Do your vote, hand it over.
Self-evaluation.
Yeah, or you want to give that to me?
We can do it back next time we speak too, right? Do we have to get back there?
What?
Do we have to get back to self-evaluation?
No.
Oh.
No. Can you get the rest for me quickly?
Next time we go.
So we have to.
No, we don't.
Ever?
No, we have to next time we speak.
Oh, yeah.
Next time you speak.
Yeah, I was like, oh, we have to do that. And I can't.
Who hasn't turned it in?
Who hasn't turned it in?
Are you going to be videotaping us
talking about it?
Very briefly.
Okay,
I know, you'll go first.
Okay, because I have class.
Yeah, I
don't wanna
know.
walk in the middle.
I know, and you don't like to be late.
I think it's rude. I don't like to be late.
Someone didn't sign it and didn't put a decision. That's just great. Thank you. Is that you? Who's Annette?
Me?
No decision.
On what?
The ballot. Meaning on what?
Right now?
A love letter to you. No, the ballot. On what? The decision is awarded to proposition or
sorry.
opposition. Thank you. Same with Sasha or Saya.
What did I do?
No decision.
In my head.
Great, all intuitive.
Sorry.
Everybody's undecided.
No, I know they wrote their points. Just part of the fun.
Thank you. This one was closer. On a 6-4 decision, the decision goes to the government. And we'll first hear from
Shira.
Hi, Shira.
Hello. Okay, so I actually voted for the negative opposition for Justin. And I just want to say that I found this subject to be a little confusing. I don't know much about it, so I was hoping that in the beginning you guys would both clarify for me. But I
Yeah.
kind of had an issue with both of you, like with the definitions. I didn't really know. And then also for both of you, you kept like talking like this, so it was really hard for me to like get into the subject. So I don't know if my vote is even makes sense because it was just kind of what I felt I connected to and was taking away. So I thought that you had good questions during your cross-exam. It kind of stumped him, which is always good. But your definitions at the beginning confused me because they weren't drawn from the topic directly. And I think you did the same thing, or maybe I'm getting them confused. I'm really sorry if that is. I thought that your ending was a little weak, the refutation, just because I think everyone was kind of confused as to what that was with the 4 steps. But other than that, I think you did good and you look very professional. And then for the negative side, I thought you had a nice setup and you used a good job of answering his questions in the cross-examination, but when you were the one asking him questions, you would ask him questions and he would answer completely going against your point, but then you wouldn't say anything back to him, you would just go on to the next question. So that is what I think, and I think you did good, and I'm sorry to be rude, but
Thank you, Shira. Anybody else have to leave immediately? Okay, good. We'll go here. While you're standing up to speak, let me just say that you would all benefit from watching videos of these debates so you see what a rebuttal looks like and how the people in previous classes did the 4 steps of refutation. You look like you've never seen a debate before, and that worried me. But thank you for going first and seeing it and doing it. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Shevin. Yeah, I voted for
Hi,
the
Shevin.
government. So I thought you did very well of like really strong responses, especially to the refutations. So that was very good. I liked your point about setting the example, like US setting an example, but there was a question that I had was, why would the world follow? I mean, there's an assumption that if you do it, someone else will follow. So I thought that was an assumption. I thought you had emphasis, your pauses were clear, but maybe a little bit more stronger in your emphasis. Yeah, I thought another point you could maybe add to strengthen it would be probably like how would this effort to reduce carbon emissions not just benefit the world, but even US itself. Like there'll be social benefits, health benefits, because it's not just economic, but there was a lot of points about economic, but there could be others as well. And just thought the rebuttals could be clearer, like more confident rebuttals, and like don't just try to rebut his solution, but more like link it to like how it link it to the main point that you stand for. Yeah.
Link it to the proposition.
Yeah. For the opposition, I thought you were very clear, and you could also possibly improve it by highlighting like what are future benefits, and also pretty similar, like not just on the economic point, but like on the environmental point, the social points, that how you benefit the world and even US itself. One thing is that I thought your solutions were great, but you could re-emphasize how your solutions will actually strengthen your main point, like the point you stand for, as a negative. And also last point is how would you force the other countries to comply? Because there's a like you said force the other countries to comply, but how is it done? Usually politics is way more complex. I thought your rebuttals and your points of clarification were really clear as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think both plan and counterplan had solvency issues that could have created a reasonable doubt on both sides. There's a class waiting outside, so make it your comment to 1 point or fewer.
Okay,
Go quickly.
I chose just in the opposition. I like the take that you took on it and referred to free riding and how other nations would just be free riding off of the United States if they. Also, I liked your use of China, how you gave clear evidence that China is the #1 emitter, so we should really focus on them. Joseph, I thought you did a really great job. I was actually really split between both of you. I liked your evidence of HFCs. Also, I liked how you pointed out that there was a contradiction in his argument, and I thought you did a really good job on the cross-X. I do think you should have kind of followed up more on why will the rest of the world follow the United States, just to give more of a clear emphasis on your solution to the solvency.
Right. There's also another big elephant in the corner, which is a big polluter named India, which no one breathed a speck on. Yes, ma'am.
I voted for the affirmative side, the government. I like the reasoning process you have made and the sound evidence you have cited, and the style of delivering your speech. And also for the negative side, I like it the way you cite your sources, and the way you use numbers and examples to illustrate your points and your four-step argumentation and refutation. I think it's very good.
Quickly.
I also chose for the government. I think the physical appearance was good, well prepared, and the only thing I would say to next time improve is maybe be more prepared in the rebuttal process and just the overall structure of the debate. For the opposition, I think it was good, but it was lacking a little bit of passion and strong emphasis on main points. So I wasn't really clear about the main points and the evidence following it, but if you were to emphasize maybe in your voice the main points, I would be more clear.
Quickly.
Hi, I'm Tiffany.
Hi, Tiffany.
I voted for the negative. I thought that his argument was very coherent, and it actually answered the proposition. For the affirmative, I feel like I really liked your evidence, and I really liked how you compared Coke and Heineken together. I think that was really effective. But I feel like the question wasn't like lowering carbon emission. Like that wasn't. I feel like you could have spent more time on like the second part of the resolution, like why should the U.S. act unilaterally?
Right. Which was the crux of the question. Right. Quickly.
I really liked both of your arguments.
Say your name.
Saya.
Hi, Saya.
I really liked both of your arguments, and I was pretty much equal on the scale for both of you until cross-examination. You both had really great evidence and really great points. I just feel like during cross-examination and refutation, you kind of were a bit more powerful.
Yeah.
But both of you guys could have just like spoken more to the audience and less read from your paper, which I know is really difficult. We all do it, but I guess it makes a really big difference when you're actually judging. So great job.
Quickly, say your name.
Annette.
Hi, Annette.
I voted for the government because I thought you did well during cross-examination. I thought you were very quick with your responses. I did really like your argument, though. I felt like you took a really nice approach to it that almost won me over. But really, I think both of you, the negative for both of you is if you were very much reading it, there wasn't much emotion to either argument. So I was almost even on both sides until the cross-examination.
Yeah, it was very telling, wasn't it? Last but not least.
Hi, I'm Rosie.
Hi, Rosie.
I voted for the government. It was really close, and the only reason I went with the government instead of with the opposition was because I got lost in the climate club. I think that didn't really make sense. I didn't know if you can't really force these countries to join, and if they didn't want to, what happens? They just keep, creating more problems. So I thought that wasn't very clear, but I think you both did really good in refutation and cross-examinations on the spot. So.
Okay, I liked your creativity. I would have loved you to do a better rebuttal. You dominated in cross-ex. And one thing about your creativity was, even though you were counter-planning with an alternative, you still, if you're going to do that, you still need solvency for your proposal and your cooperation. You need to persuade people that this cooperation will work. And I think in the end, that's probably why you lost, because I don't think people were persuaded by it. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Question about
Yeah.
midterm. Okay.
Can you carry